Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Ask Abhijit show. I hope everybody is doing great. Let me see who all is there on the live chat. By the way, today is not a super chat session. I'm going to take just questions from the live chat for a change because people have been saying that. So why not go back to this for one episode? Yes. So today it's all going to be live chat, no super chat. I've switched off super chat. Let's see who all is there on the live stream. I can see Samrat Shukla, Mystic SK, Darshan Patil, Shashank Kaushik, Aditya Gaikwad, Abhijit Tripathi, 2K Watts Photography, Vishal Patro, Xenomorphosis, UC Anonymous Scientist, Rishikesh Das Gupta, Yashwant Sudhir, Prakash Bhatia, Hunter Kenway, Lau Liet, Vidhi Manyar, Dungar Singh Chauhan, Brijesh SK, Mr. Manik, Somesh Kota, Shri Ramchandraya Namaha, Rahul Lakshmanan, Utkarsh Rao, Dhruv Duria, Pratham Sharma, Geopolitical Dubey, Rashmi Rathore, Richard, Truthful Penguin, DGBHF, Ayush Singh, Darshan Patel, Tanmay Deshpande, Piyush Rana, Sentin SP, Galuer, Priyanshi Sood, Aditya Singh, Anand Chandak, Pranay Paul from Kolkata, Love Acharya, Mystic SK, Somesh Kota, Ironclad, Akshit, Sahil, Om, Grok, Vibha, Suhas Reddy, Aradhya, Dashore, Abhijit Chavda, Light, Ankit Zone, Ichinose Senpai, Kaizen 007, Sentin SP, Nishal Rai, Spade, Pratham Sharma, and everybody else. Thank you so much for being on the live stream. Instead of just greeting you all, let's take some questions. So please go ahead. Please ask your questions. I'll take as many as possible. McLevin says, I can see some more people, Harshay, Janvi, Pratham, and so on and so forth. Okay. McLevin says, apparently Air India serviced their planes from a Turkish company. They had decided to replace them after the India-Pakistan conflict, but it seems like this plane was serviced by them. I think we're gonna have to wait for the investigation to happen, wait for the facts to come out. Maybe this is one of the facts that's coming out. I'm not sure. Yeah, so let's wait and watch. It's been a terrible tragedy. The aircraft just trying to take off and goes to a certain height and then just loses power, both engines. Crazy. So yeah, okay. So let's see if this turns out to be verifiable information. Let's see. Anonymous scientist says, was the fight between Donald Trump and Elon Musk pre-planned? There is always the possibility so that something like this may be pre-planned. Yeah, but asking me that question means you're expecting that maybe I have knowledge that is restricted and secret. So I don't have that knowledge. There's always a possibility that you may stage a fight. You stage a fight, a fake fight, to see who stands with whom and so on. That way you can make out who are your true friends and your true enemies, and that helps you in many ways. So it's possible, but we don't know for sure. Ankit Zon says, what do you think? How did the Ahmedabad air crash tragedy happen? It's too early to say. It looks like both the engines failed. Because because you can see the aircraft take off, it's going fine, and suddenly you can see it lose power, and it's still flaring like that. It just flares all the way down and crashes. So it looks like both engines lost power simultaneously. Now the real question is, why did that happen? And that we have to see. I don't know for sure. It's extremely rare, like I said during my brief presentation about such incidents. Extremely rare for such a thing to happen. Simultaneous dual engine failure, incredibly rare. So generally it happens when the plane ingests volcanic ash, right? But there's no volcanic ash here. It happens when there's icing of the system, the fuel system, but there's no ice in Ahmedabad. I assure you of that. And it could happen if there's a massive bilateral bird strike. And now that's a possibility we have to look into. I'm not really familiar with Ahmedabad airport. I'm familiar with some other airports. So do you have flocks of bird around the Ahmedabad airport? If you have flocks of birds, then this could have contributed possibly. But we'll have to see. It's too early to say. Okay, Darshan Patil says just out of E5, loved it. Thank you so much. We had all believed that Trump government would benefit India more, but Trump is in favor of Pakistan more than ever. Operation Sindoor should have continued. It will hurt us always. These problems occur. They pop up. The U.S. has a long-standing tradition of supporting and favoring Pakistan, and Trump is simply the latest example of that. And you see, Pakistan is a very attractive nation for people who are plunder oriented um, because the Pakistani dictatorship is perfectly okay with having foreigners plunder their land and their resources and their people, right? So that's something Pakistan has that India doesn't. We have way more resources, but we are not open to someone like Trump coming and plundering our resources. We are okay with him, you know, investing in the extraction of resources, provided that he does so properly, and it's a win-win situation rather than a Trump 10, India 1 situation. But when it comes to Pakistan, Pakistan is okay with Trump 100, Pakistan 2. So you see that's why Pakistan always uh, succeeds when it comes to these predatory nations. So yeah, that's where we are. Ayush Singh says our hard power score must have changed. Not quite, not quite. Hard power score from the way I calculate it doesn't change every 15 days, 20 days, every 2 months. It depends on very simple factors that are publicly available data. It depends on your land area, your population. Okay, that's not going to change. It depends on your military budget. It depends on GDP. These are rising. So actually, your hard power is rising. It depends on your power projection capabilities. It depends on your nuclear power. Everything's rising. So our hard power is not changing because of that. The only thing that can decrease our large power is the sovereignty score. If our sovereignty score drops below 1, I'm not sure if it has dropped below 1 despite everything that's happened recently. So we still have 5 nations with a sovereignty score of 1. That's the US, China, India, Pakistan, India, Russia, and Israel. So based on all these factors, our hard power score has actually probably increased since the last time I calculated it. Okay. Um, Rohan says, first of all, heartfelt condolences to the people who died in the unfortunate plane crash. I agree. Yeah. Do you think the attack on the Indian embassy in US and UK are intentionally enabled? I mean, which attacks on? There's nothing recently that's happened, as far as I know. But in the past, you've had attacks on the Indian embassy and consulates in the UK. I'm not sure about the US, but you had such incidents in Canada as well. Are these intentionally enabled? Yes, they are intentionally enabled. Yes, they are. Because it's very easy for you to block any protests and any attacks on a foreign embassy. We have foreign embassies all over the place in a certain part of Delhi. Okay? The place called Chanakyapuri. We have embassies all over the place. And that's a very well patrolled area. You have a lot of security measures in place over there, and it's not like you can just walk in there and start protesting against an embassy unless the government is okay with it. Similarly, other governments, like in places in cities like London or wherever you have Ottawa, etc., Washington DC, the local governments can very much prevent protesters from coming anywhere near a specific embassy if they want. But if they are okay with this happening, then you can have attacks that happen. So um Jason Downey says, why was Asim Munir invited to the White House? Does this indicate hostility for India? In case you just witnessed my previous live stream, which happened like 60 seconds ago, Geostrategy episode 5, if you watch the second part of that, the second segment, you will understand exactly why Asim Munir was invited to the White House. He's deeply involved in Trump business operations, okay, which are benefiting the Trump family. The Trump family, they see a value of about $65 trillion in Pakistan, and they would love to exploit that. And Asim Munir would love to have them exploit everything and take everything out of Pakistan, as long as he gets some benefits. So it's a win-win for Asim Munir and the Trump family. But I'm not sure if it's a win for Pakistan. I don't know if it's a win for the US. Maybe it's a win for the US, and so on. So, does this indicate hostility for India? Well, it indicates this great love for Pakistan and Asim Munir, which naturally means a level of hostility for India. There you have it. Yes, it does. Okay. Um, Geopolitical Dubey says Guyana sized oil discovery likely in Andaman Sea, stated by Minister Hardeep Puri. Do we have such oil reserves to become a net exporter? If we put money in exploration, if we, yeah, explore this seriously. Well, if you have a Guyana sized resources, I think we can become a net exporter. I think our energy resources are criminally under explored. I think if we properly do an exploration of all the undersea oil and gas resources that we have of the western, eastern, etc. coasts of India, the Andaman region, the Lakshadweep region, the so-called Arabian Sea region, which is the Sea of Saurashtra, etc. I think if we do this properly, and if we look at the terrestrial resources that we have, and if we do this properly, I think we could possibly become the greatest exporter of energy. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that there's a possible Guyana-sized oil discovery in the Andaman Sea. I haven't heard of it thus far. Let's quickly take a look at it. Let me try and Google it. I haven't seen this news this far. Stay signed out. Oil discovery and Andaman Sea. No, discovery. Exclusive interview with new Indian the so and so minister, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, laid at hinting that the country may be on the cusp of discovering a game-changing oil reserve. India on the brink of a $20 trillion leap. Guyana-sized oil discovery likely. I don't care about likely. Is it discovered or not? Okay, so this doesn't really answer my question. He's saying something may be likely. Well, I've been saying it for a long time. So things are likely, but where is it? You should talk about these things only after you actually discover something. So I don't know about this, but I think should be able to find stuff pretty soon. So there we have it. Okay, now what else? Shubham says, does India need to have long-term plans to weaken down US and Chinese economies? Look, whatever plans we have, we will not discuss, and we will not discuss them openly. And I'm sure, look, the US is not a friend of ours. It's very, very clear by now. US is acting like an enemy of ours. They're siding with our enemies, and so on. I mean, they have so many projects that are going on that are bad for India, for Indian national interests, for Indian geopolitical interests. They are actively trying to harm Indian interests in a variety of ways. Whether it's the US, whether it's the Chinese, both of them. So we should always have plans to take countermeasures, is what I would say. Saurav Kumar Pandey says, can this be a fuel sabotage? There is contamination of fuel. Watch my previous live stream, episode 5, in which I've gone into the possible causes of a simultaneous dual engine failure, in which you can have fuel contamination as a factor, right? Now, fuel sabotage and all, I will not go into all these speculative theories at this point in time. It's too early. Let the government do a proper investigation and let them announce what has happened. I will not go into speculation at this point in time. Right. Brijesh SK says, time is ticking. Do you think Israel will risk attacking Iran's nuclear facilities, which Israel has vowed to never allow? Iran warned to strike back Israel, Dimona nuclear site, and so on. We'll see. I don't know what Israel's calculations are. Obviously, time is ticking. Time is ticking. You are right. Like you say, you must have watched some of my previous episodes of geostrategy. I did say there's a significant chance, non-trivial chance of the whole matter coming to becoming a flashpoint. And why do I say the clock is ticking? Why do I say this is the increasingly dangerous flashpoint? It's because Iran is said to have enough nuclear fissile material for about 10 nuclear warheads by now. And they have significant reserves now of uranium that has been enriched to in excess of 60%, maybe more. And the enrichment is going on. And the nuclear talks are not going anywhere. The Americans are making maximalist demands, and the Iranians are, one would say, rightfully from their perspective, rejecting these demands as a sovereign nation. So it looks like there's no headway, and the Iranians are continuing to enrich uranium, which is a matter of huge concern for Israel, because Israel is a regional nation. It's a nation in the neighborhood of Iran. Now, there's a distance of about 1,000 kilometers roughly between the borders of Iran and Israel. There's another nation in between, which is Iraq, obviously. There's Jordan as well, and so on. But yeah. So the longer time goes, the more fissile material the Iranians will have that could potentially be used in nuclear weapons. So Israel would love to end this nuclear program once and for all, but Iran has significant, offensive capabilities. They have excellent missiles, very large quantities of missiles, and so on. So it's a risk that that Israel takes on if it decides to attack Iranian nuclear facilities. It does take on a big risk if it does that, because Dimona. So Dimona is a nuclear. It's a nuclear site. I can show you where it is. It's not very hard to find. I have shown it before in the past. Dimona on various previous live streams. So let's quickly take a look at it. Bir Shiva. So let's go to Israel. Let's go to the satellite imagery, and it is near the city of Bir Shiva. The Dimona. Here is Dimona, and it's not at Dimona, but it's outside of Dimona that we have this nuclear facility. And here we have it. I think this is the one we're talking about, are we? Let us see. This is a chemical thing. This is a chemical plant. Okay, one second. Where was it? I'll have to zoom out a little bit more. And Negev. Here it is, Negev. The Negev Nuclear Research Center. And here we have the reactors and so on. So I'm sure it's very well defended, but hitting a target with ballistic or cruise missiles is just a mathematical thing. All you have to do is to saturate the strike zone with more missiles than the defense system can handle. It's as simple as that. It's a mathematical thing. So if Iran can do that, well, it'll end up hitting Dimona. But hitting a nuclear power plant, a nuclear weapons production plant, it's a very dangerous thing to do, because then it invites very harsh responses and so on. So it depends on what Israel first does, and then Iran may respond in a certain way. Okay, Pranay Paul says, with pro-Hamas rallies and mob violence now routine in LA, is this free speech or just chaos disguised as democracy? Well, it's actually surprising that these things are happening in the US. The US is a police state. They don't allow. Historically, traditionally, they have not been very lenient when it comes to demonstrations against state power. I mean, what happened during the Vietnam War protests in various universities? Students were shot. And so on. So what does this tell you? These pro-Hamas rallies, it looks like there's a political dimension to this. It looks like these are politically motivated protests. So see, the Republicans, they are anti-immigration, they are anti-Hamas, they are pro-Israel, and so on, and they are pro-order. And the Democrats are a leftist party, so they are pro-Hamas, they are pro-immigration, they are pro-anarchy and all that. So it looks like maybe, possibly, I'm not saying there's any proof, but I'm saying possibly it's possible that perhaps the Democrats may be behind this. So this could be a political challenge to the Trump administration. And California is a state ruled by Democrats, so that makes it easier to do that, right? And then that brings the governor of California in a direct clash with the president of the US. So is this free speech? Is this chaos? I think it's neither free speech, neither is it chaos. It's a political movement. It's a political thing that's happening. Harshay says, is Mewar the current king, Lakshya Singh Mewar puppet king or real king? There are no real kings in India. What country are you living in? There are no real kings in India. What is a real king? It's a king who has power. A king who has a title, I am a king, but who has no power is not a king. Being a king means having the power of a king. But inheriting some title from somewhere, it doesn't mean you're a king. It just means you have a title. So there are no kings today in India. That's my answer to you. I hope you understand it. Uh, I don't know. I have to hunt for good questions. Uh, Sri Ramachandra Nama says, "Do BRICS really matter?" BRICS does matter to a certain extent, but the problem with BRICS is that it's an economic kind of coalition of nations. It's not a military alliance of any kind, or even an economic alliance of any kind, which means that you don't have any proper leadership, a strong leadership. You obviously have a strong nation that kind of wants to use BRICS for its own purposes, for its own agenda, which makes it unlikely that the other nations will contribute much to it. So you have China who wants to use BRICS as an instrument for strengthening China's geopolitical agenda. But obviously, India will not participate in that. So when you have a major nation like India that's not really a big participant in BRICS, then BRICS becomes kind of a lame duck thing. Even Russia sees China as an adversary. I've been saying that for a very long time. Now the New York Times agrees with me. So when you have two nations, Russia and India, that look upon China as an adversary, but would like to benefit from whatever overall advantages you perhaps someday may get out of an economic coalition. That's why you're in it. So it doesn't really matter overall. It really cannot change things the way the EU, which is an official alliance, can do. So BRICS at this point in time doesn't really matter a lot. Okay. Vaibhav says, why shouldn't Iran develop nuclear weapons? Isn't this the same case as the US getting butthurt by India's nuclear testing? Well, if you are the big power with the big nukes, then you don't want anybody to become a potential challenger. Today you will be small, but in 20 years you'll be bigger, and then it may be a problem. So that's why the US doesn't want any new challenges to arise. And that's why they are telling Iran, I don't care if you're sovereign or not, you don't have the right to nuclear weapons. And Iran is saying, go take a hike. I'm a sovereign nation. I'll do what I want. So my answer is Iran has every right to do whatever everybody else can do. If the US can have nuclear weapons, if China can have it, if India can have it, Russia can have it, even if even Pakistan can have nuclear weapons, why can't Iran have nuclear weapons? Excuse me. So, from a sovereignty perspective, Iran has the right to do whatever it wants. Other nations may see it as a threat. Well, it's that is their problem. So yeah, that's the deal. Uh, NTN888 says, you said India should develop its own Starlink for security reasons, not just security reasons, for financial reasons also. You can get a lot of money from the world if you have a good service to offer. So this lead to vast inefficient and duplication. What? Is Starlink necessary? Instead, develop suitable terrestrial tech like 5G. Starlink is a geostrategic project. It has a dual purpose. The first purpose is to raise a lot of money for Elon Musk, with which he will build his Mars rockets and all that. Okay? So you offer these internet services across the world, sitting at home or sitting in a forest or sitting on top of Mount Everest, you can get 10 Mbps internet. Well, that's great, right? That's great. So that's the sort of thing he's offering. No matter where you are, you will have access. So I'm sure, and it's pretty expensive internet, but I suppose some people will want to buy it. And of course, if you are going to Antarctica, if you're going in the middle for a hike in the middle of a forest, etc., this could be useful, and so on and so forth. So there are various reasons why people would want to buy it. So he's offering that, and with that, he hopes to raise money, a lot of money, hopefully. So he's putting up a constellation of thousands of satellites all across all across Earth orbit, low Earth orbit, right? That's one reason why Starlink exists, to provide this service and make money for Elon Musk. The other reason is a hidden reason. I am pretty sure it has spying capabilities on the rest of the world. I'm sure it has cameras and other whatever it is. It's capable of providing 24 by 7 coverage of the surface of the planet, and that's a very powerful asset if it is the case for the US government. So that's why Starlink exists. It's a vital geopolitical asset for the US. Now, from a civilian perspective, okay, it's a very huge waste of money. Why not just have a terrestrial network like 5G, etc.? But as a nation, you don't think that way. As a civilian, you will think that way, but as a nation, you want global surveillance if you're a superpower. So you will invest in that. Okay, so it's different the way civilians think, and it's different the way large nations think and powerful nations think. For them, these investments are worth the price. Now, I said that we are a rising nation, a growing nation. We have security challenges, so we need to ideally have our own Starlink like constellation. Vast inefficiency duplication, that's a civilian perspective. I'm talking about national security perspective, in which, in from that perspective, whether it's duplication, etc., blah 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 blah, it's all worth it. Okay, right. Pratham says, how can satellites affect Earth if there is millions of them orbiting, 100 men versus one gorilla type thing? The satellites will be made from materials that were extracted out of the Earth. So the satellites, if there's a million satellites, it's a significant amount of mass, but the mass came from the Earth itself. So it's not going to have a significant impact on the Earth because it's going to be an extension of the Earth's mass. And these little, tiny little satellites compared to the Earth, they cannot really exert any massive gravitational pull or anything significant. Whatever it's going to be a negligible impact. So it's not going to change the it's not going to affect tides, let's say, or something like that, so it doesn't really end up affecting the Earth in any significant way. Rishabh says, what's your choice whether there should be war between Iran and the US or Israel? Is it good for India? What's good for India is that the current geopolitical balance of power in the region continues. Let's take a look at the map. What's the geopolitical balance of power like in the region? Where is map? Here is map. Where is the map? Here is map. So we're talking about this region, the extended subcontinent region. We're going westwards, which is into West Asia. So over here, the balance of power is that the major, most powerful nation is India. And westwards, we have a terrorist nation, Pakistan. We have Afghanistan, which wants to be left alone. Don't bother me. That's it. That's all it wants. There's the Central Asian nations that are part of the Russian geopolitical sphere of influence. Then there's Iran, which wants to become more powerful. There's Saudi Arabia, which is a US ally. There's Oman, UAE, etc. All these nations here are in various ways US allies. There's Yemen, which is an Iranian ally, and so on. And then there is Israel, which is America's number one ally. So, and then there is Iraq, which is now a non-entity because the Americans destroyed Iraq in 2003. And ever since, Iraq has become a nation that is under US occupation. It is a non-entity now. It has no geopolitical power of its own. So the Americans completely transformed the balance of power in the region in the year 2003. Now they would like this to happen once again by taking out Iran, which would make the region very strongly pro-US. And the US becomes a very powerful nation in the region, more than it currently is, indirectly. So what is best for India? Indians love Israel, etc. And Israel is a very good partner of India in technology and on various other things. But what's good for India is that Iran continues to exist the way it is right now. Even an Iran that rises would be overall good for India as long as it doesn't become as powerful as India, and in which case there could be a conflict of some kind. But I would very much like to see Iran continue to exist. I don't want it to be destroyed. I don't want it to suffer a revolution or some kind of transition to democracy or whatever. Iran's political system and political model is their internal matter. Okay, we have no business interfering in that. So let Iran exist the way it does. If Iran is destroyed, it will create a huge hole, geopolitical hole in the region, which will lead to an imbalance of power, and then something will rush in and fill the vacuum. That will be geopolitical instability. It will go in a direction that's not good for India. So my choice is there should be no war between Iran and the US. Because if there's a war, Iran will put up a big fight, but Iran will lose because the US is just too powerful. And the same goes with Israel. If Israel and Iran go to war, the Americans will come to Israel's aid, guaranteed. So yeah, that's the deal. Um, from my perspective, Iran should continue to exist the way it does. It should Nothing should change over here. Sumit Agarwal says recently Carlson said that the deep state should weaken India. These fellows, okay, I'm not aware of whether it's true or not. I have not seen the quote or whatever, but these fellows think they can play God with the world. So they will think that way because they are all powerful. Their country is all powerful. The response to that is that we should keep our heads down, stop boasting and bragging about Vishwaguru and superpower and all that nonsense. Put your heads down and get to work. Work as hard as possible the next 20 years. Then we'll put our head up and see where we are now. That's it. Rohan Suneja says, why is it that Sweden having only a defense budget of $13 billion and India 86 billion? We don't have our own cutting edge equipment, but Sweden has. Look at Visby class corvette. Look at the Gotling class submarines. Right? What is it called? Gotling class submarine. Gotland class submarine. It costs $100 million a piece. Peanuts. But it can take down aircraft carriers. Gotland class submarines. So why is it so? Is the question. We have a defense budget of 900 what $86 billion. Sweden has $13 billion, but they manufacture their own things. It's because they have a long-standing tradition of manufacturing their own things. And we, in our case, the government never allowed this until in the past 10 years. Now we have this focus on developing our own defense equipment. Wait 10 years, we're going to be a different beast. All you need is to unleash the talent and creativity of the Indian people and the industriousness of the Indian people. So once this is unleashed by the government of India, we're going to change very rapidly. So in another 10 years, we're going to be a major defense exporter, and things will be different. We're going to have various different kinds of aircraft, different kinds of helicopters, different kinds of howitzers and artillery and machine guns and whatnot, and warships and submarines and offensive and defensive equipment of various kinds and so on. So the moment you allow a nation to develop its own industries, then this is what you have. So Sweden has a long tradition of having these niche industries that they excel in the military domain. So that's why they have the situation. Right. Okay. Yashwant Sudir says, should the government of India consider removing access to IAEA after crossing a certain threshold as an economic power, considering increased deaths of Indian nuclear scientists after giving access to IAEA? Okay, I keep hearing about these deaths of Indian nuclear scientists. So maybe it must be a real thing. I've never gone and looked into the details. My point is, giving IAEA access to Indian nuclear facilities is tantamount to foreign interference. But maybe we have signed some agreements which require us to do that. I am sure, just like we walked away from the Indus Waters Treaty because it was not good for us, similarly in the future, when we are powerful enough, we can walk away from these various agreements the moment it makes sense for us to walk away from them. Right now, we are not that powerful. So let's currently be in that. I agree that this is not a good thing for India. Who the hell is the IAEA to come and inspect our facilities? It's kind of humiliating. But we signed some agreements with very powerful nations, which is why we have to do this for the time being. Eventually, we'll throw them out. Absolutely, we should throw them out. Each and every one of them. White Fang was a dog. Wolf. Okay, White Fang. Some people are speculating that things happening in the US indicate The beginning of the downfall of a civilization that's already past its peak. What's your view on this? So the US is not a civilization. The West is not a civilization. It's an empire. The US is an empire. And Western civilization, it's not a civilization. Okay? The West is not one entity, it's a lots of different entities that have been subsumed forcibly into one thing. And that's why they claim there's a Western civilization. There's no such thing. There used to be a Slavic civilization. There used to be, well, there was Indo-European culture all over the place, and it manifested itself in various different forms, like the Slavic civilization, like the Anglo-Saxon culture, like the um, like the Celtic culture, and so on and so forth. But you take all these things together and smash them together and say it's one civilization. That's a lie. It's a cope because they have no civilization of their own. Even Rome wasn't a civilization, it was an empire. Greece was a civilization that no longer exists. It's been destroyed by Christianity. And the old Indo European culture has been destroyed by Christianity. Now, that's the preface to what I have to answer. So, things are happening in the US, which indicates the downfall, the beginning of the downfall of the US civilization. First of all, the US doesn't have a civilization, it's just an empire. It doesn't really have a culture of its own. Yeah, now you could say it has some kind of culture. Yeah, guns is a culture. Drinking beer underage is their culture, and so on and so forth, so on and so forth. Promiscuity and single parenthood is their culture, right? A person having like 15 different sexual partners at the same time is culture, and so on. So that's not the elements. The elements of a civilization. That's not the characteristic of a civilization. But it wasn't always like this. The US was very different in the 1950s. It wasn't like this. It had much higher standards. At that time in the 1950s, it had the highest standards anywhere in the world. And then things started slipping slowly, imperceptibly, gradually. But then it ends up with today, where things are like night and day difference between the US of now and the US of the 1950s. Very different. So there is a decline in cultural standards in the US, no question. It's very visible. But I don't consider the US to be a civilization. But the decline of the moral fabric of society is very visible. So yeah, it's a society that's in decline. It's a society that's decaying. But as a power, it's at the pinnacle of its power. So imagine a society that has no moral standards, that has very low moral values or an absence of values, and they are the most powerful nation. I mean, imagine that's a nightmare scenario. That's my view on this. That a nation with no ethical moral standards is lecturing the world on all kinds of random things, and it has the most powerful military in the world, and they have a nuclear doctrine that says that before the US, for whatever reason, gets destroyed, it should destroy all the entire world. So if let's say the US is on the verge of losing nuclear war to Russia, then it's required to nuke every country in the world. It's required to nuke India. Why? Because that's the doctrine. I mean, how evil is that? How evil is that? Yes? Okay. Uh, Darshan Patil says you are not in favor of AC careers. I think I understand what you're trying to say here. Aircraft carriers? Aircraft carriers, I think you are saying. Yes. Okay. But with the air defense capabilities shown during Operation Sindoor, would your opinion change a bit? No. We need submarines. Yeah. We need the most dangerous things available. And the most dangerous thing and scary thing is what cannot be seen, but which has a tremendous amount of firepower. Now it's an aircraft carrier is a luxury that a superpower can afford. But and I'm sure an aircraft carrier will be valuable against Pakistan, for example. Pakistan doesn't have the best offensive capabilities, and we have some of the best defensive missiles in the world. So we have missiles that will serve as point defense for warships and aircraft carriers. So I'm sure we can pretty much safeguard an aircraft carrier properly. But what if we have to, for example, hypothetically fight the Americans? The aircraft carrier will be a sitting duck in that case. Or let's say fight the Chinese. The Chinese warships have VLS tubes with what, 128 plus missiles, offensive missiles. You have two three warships, it numerically overwhelms you, and then you lose your most precious asset. So I think my opinion hasn't changed one bit. Operation Sindoor was against a weak nation, so that doesn't really matter. So my opinion hasn't changed. I think aircraft carriers are not required for a nation like India at this point in time. In 20 years, when we are, let's say, 15-20 trillion dollar economy, yeah, sure, at that time we should have aircraft carriers. So the two that we have today, two or whatever number we have today, keep them. I'm not saying get rid of them, keep them. And in the future, maybe they'll be of some use. But right now, we need submarines. That's the most important thing. Okay, 2K Watts Photography says Russia has offered Sukhoi 57 export version with its source code under Make in India. What retaliation could we expect from the US if we get this aircraft by the time AMC is mass produced? The Americans will impose some kind of sanctions on India, or they will throw some kind of tantrum, or they will further, arm the Pakistanis or something. The Americans will throw some kind of tantrum and try to harm India in multiple ways. But they expect India to be a vassal, and we will not be a vassal. They expect us to buy the flying trash can, which is the F-35. We're not going to buy that. There are various Indian analysts who are shilling for the US, and who are recommending that we buy the F-35. My opinion is very clear. The F-35 is a piece of flying piece of garbage. I don't know how good or bad the SU57 is. I'm sure it's a decent aircraft. Maybe it has some defects and deficiencies, perhaps, but so does the F-35. The F-35 comes with poison. The Sukhoi doesn't come with poison. What poison? Backdoors, kill switches, and vassalhood. So we don't need that poison. So I think, if we get the Sukhoi 57 and we are able to modify it, if it comes under the proper terms and conditions, then we should be able to improve it significantly. We have tremendous electronics. We have a tremendous radar that we manufacture ourselves, and we have got very frightening missiles, air-to-air missiles, that we can equip the aircraft with. So if we can modify the Sukhoi 57 to our requirements, we can transform it into a very dangerous beast. So I think makes sense to go for it. Okay, what is the question? Sarang Ninale says, can you please shed some light and brief on the stand of the ASEAN nations on China, US, India dynamic? Who do they side with? Could you give a detailed analysis in one of your episodes? We'll see. Maybe I can do that in the future. See, the ASEAN nations, they don't want to be part of any big fight. They want to be left alone. They want to just mind their own business. They want to trade with other nations. They want to grow their economies and provide better living standards for their nations. That's all they care about. They are not interested in who's fighting whom. They are scared of China. They are scared of the US also. India, they're not scared of, and they like India. So if they are given a choice, they would actually prefer India or all these nations. But China has tremendously deep pockets, and when Xi Jinping comes visiting, you treat him with respect, and you ask him to invest, and obviously he will invest. But then he will also bully you at the same time. So that's the problem with China. So they would like to side with nobody. But if effectively, who do they side with? They side with the US. They side more with the US than with anybody else. But they have never been against India. And they're scared of China. But they don't like the US also, because the US is a big bully, and everyone knows that. So that's the deal. That's the dynamic. The friendliest they are is towards India. The most amount of goodwill they have towards a nation, it's India. But India has never really taken the time to do a proper outreach and so on until in recent times. Even now, I think we can do much better. We should have people-to-people relations with Indonesia, with Thailand, with Cambodia, with Vietnam. Right now, Thailand and Cambodia are fighting each other for the ancient Shiva temple, the Priya Vihar temple. I think we should mediate. Why not? Both will trust us. Unless we mess up and so on. So yeah, that's the deal with ASEAN. MK says, how did the Soviets counter the German blitzkrieg? The Germans could have won. The Soviets were losing. They were giving up kilometer after kilometer of the territory, hundreds of kilometers they gave up, more than 1,000 kilometers of territory they gave up, right? The German Blitzkrieg was super successful. Operation Barbarossa. They punched all the way deep into the Soviet lines. At the end of the day, eventually they were on the outskirts of Moscow. They could see Moscow with binoculars. But what went wrong? A decision, a choice they made. They said that okay, let's wait for Moscow. Let's go down south for the Caucasus region where the big oil fields are, because Germany needs oil. But that gave Moscow sufficient time to somehow wait things out. And then the great old the great old Russian general came into the battlefield, General Winter. And General Winter isn't merciful. So the price the Germans paid for the wrong choice was that tens of thousands of their soldiers just froze where they were. They froze, they became stone, died. And then the Russian counteroffensive began. The Russians they had done all these horrible purges in the 1930s, late 1930s, 37 onwards. All their great generals were killed off by Stalin and Molotov. I mean, Svechin, the great scholar Svechin was killed, and so on. So the Russian military was essentially brand new. All the great leaders had been killed off because Stalin was suspicious of them. So the Russians had to learn how to fight. They had to learn operational arts and strategy and tactics and all that on the go while fighting on the job. But they somehow managed. And once winter came in, the Soviets came into their own. And they started pushing the Germans back, inch by inch, foot by foot, mile by mile, until they reached Berlin. And they spent oceans of blood to defeat the Germans. My God, nobody fought more than the Soviets. Nobody bled more than the Soviets. Nobody died more than the Soviets. More than 27 million Russians died in this. But they prevailed and they defeated the Germans. Okay. Um, let's see, what else do we have? Vishal says, you said Starlink won't be turned off when the Indian government restricts internet in an area, but during internet shutdown, only mobile SIMs are turned off. Home Wi-Fi is never shut off; it's always on. You may have not lived in an area where some such disturbances happened, because when the government wants to switch off the internet, it actually switches off the internet. Your home Wi-Fi can be on, but there'll be no signal, right? So unless you receive signals to your home from outside, you will not be able to use Wi-Fi. Let's say you don't have a router, but you have you don't have the modem, which gets signals from outside. But you have a Wi-Fi router at home, and you switch it on, but it's not connected to a modem. Then what the hell will it do? You will get a signal on your phone, but that signal is like there's nothing in it. So please understand the nuances. I don't know why it's so hard to understand, but okay, I'm happy to answer the questions. Okay. Ichinose Senpai says India's growth projections are based on its young population, but as AI improves and reduces the value of human labor, will our demographic advantage diminish, weakening India's edge over other nations? It could. It could. Our demographic dividend, etc., all the wonderful slogans that we have, they're based on the value of human capital and human labor. But if AI becomes a big deal, which it will, I promise it will, then, and especially if you can, when AI becomes robotics enabled, or robotics becomes AI enabled, then you will have factories that work 24/7. They work in the dark. They don't need lights. They keep on churning out goods. So if we can become an early adopter of these technologies, then our demographic advantage may diminish, but it won't affect our economic output. It may actually enhance our economic output. So we have to play the game right. We cannot be left behind in the AI and robotics race. As long as we are among the front runners of this, we're going to do well. And the demographic advantage or lack of it eventually will not make any difference. Neyutuka says, why does India allow Turkish companies in our sensitive aviation industry? I think we should not. And why does it do it? Well, I'm not the person to ask this question. You have to ask the government of India, what on earth are you people doing? What are you people doing? Why are you allowing these nations like Turkey, into our sensitive sectors? Why are you allowing China to provide 80% of our CCTV cameras? These are all economic threats, security threats, national security threats. There are other nations that are whose equipment is national security threats, and so on. So yeah, this is something the government needs to answer, and they need to not just answer, but they need to do something about this. Okay. McLevin says, last month I asked you a question about US setting camp in Bangladesh and probably a deal on the table. Kukiland in exchange of POK. Can you answer that now? You had asked this? Had I taken this and refused to answer? Okay, let's answer the question anyway. US setting camp in Bangladesh and a deal. Kukiland in exchange for POK. So India gets POK and India gives up half of Manipur and Mizoram. If the US gives us a deal like that, we should laugh it off. We can tell them to go and go to hell. If they want to do things in Bangladesh, that's their prerogative, because Bangladesh is a separate nation. They've taken it over. They need a coup, and they have their own puppet government there now, just like in Pakistan. So they have East and West Pakistan. If they want to mess around there, you do it. But the moment you try to touch Indian territory, we're gonna be there's gonna be hell to pay for that. So if the US gives such a deal, puts a deal on the table, you give us cookie land for Christ, and we'll give you POK back. We should tell them to take a hike. I can think of various impolite things to say, but I'll not utter those words here. But yeah, that's what we should do. Saturn 88 says, can you explain the Oreshnik weapon system developed by Russia? How does the West look at it, and does India need such a weapon to counter China? The Oreshnik is some kind of missile, right? I don't know the details of the missile. There's the Okhotnik, which is obviously a stealth fighter bomber kind of thing. The Oreshnik is some kind of missile, probably a hypersonic missile. Um, Maybe it's a ballistic missile with a hypersonic entry speed or something, and maybe intermediate range. I don't remember exactly what it is now. I could do a Google search, but yeah. So I'm sure it's a good missile, pretty dangerous missile, pretty scary missile. How does the West look at it? I'm sure they look at it with concern. Does India need weapons to counter China? We have our own weapons to counter China. And until recently, we have never seen Indian missiles in action, but now we know what they look like and what they sound like. They're pretty scary. So I'm sure that the missiles that we saw land in Pakistan, which were all those videos were filmed by Pakistanis, right? Missiles landing on Noor Khan Air Base and Sargodha and Chaklala and Rawalpindi and wherever. We got to see what a missile looks and sounds like when at the receiving end. Um, so those missiles that we saw were short distance cruise missiles and short range ballistic missiles, most likely, or other kinds of missiles. Surface to air sorry, air to surface missiles perhaps, and in drones. When it comes to China, we need intermediate to long range missiles, not ICBMs, but the intermediate range missiles, missiles with a range of about 5,000 roughly kilometers. Yeah. So once you have those, then you can make China behave, and we have those. Obviously, I'm sure the Agni 4 can take care of all of Chinese territory. The Agni 5 can go beyond that, and we possibly have certain other tools in our toolkit that we don't speak about. And we also have long distance hypersonic missiles that are going to be tested. I'm talking about hypersonic cruise missiles that are going to be tested with a range of 1,500 or so kilometers. The BrahMos has extended ranges now that could be in excess of 800 to 1,000 kilometers possibly, and so on. So we have a whole bunch of missiles ranging from cruise missiles to ballistic missiles and so on. And we don't need an Oreshnik. We have our own very scary weapons. So yeah, when it comes to missiles, we good. We don't need anything from anybody. We probably have the scariest missiles in the world. Oh, anonymous scientist says, would it be beneficial for India to restart Operation Sindoor in winter as it would keep the PLA at bay? We did Operation Sindoor in May, in the height of summer, and the PLA stayed away, right? The problem isn't China in this matter. China could become a problem, but the problem is the US. The problem is Trump. Okay. So, yeah, sure, restart Operation Sindoor in winter, but Trump will again come in the way and he'll impose sanctions this time. Last time he threatened, and so on. Um, Amisha says, why don't we see stars nowadays? How did the sky look like 100 years back? Well, I wasn't there 100 years back, so I don't know what it looks like. I don't have memories of that, but I was there in my childhood, and the sky was very different back then. So, what do we have today? We have two major problems in the sky today. One is pollution. So, the entire sky is obscured with all this dust and smoke all over the place, especially in metropolitan cities in India. So there is that form of pollution, and then there is light pollution. So what light pollution does is that it augments the air pollution, the smoke and the dust that blankets a city like a miasma. That is now lit up with the light pollution. So what that causes is this glowing envelope of noxious gas over a city. So when you look up, you see the whole sky is glowing orange or white or whatever, or a mixture. And because of that, you hardly get to see stars except for the brightest ones. So that's the combination of light pollution and air pollution. Let's say you have no air pollution, you just have light pollution. Even then, you will have this big glow in the sky. And that will, dim out the stars. Now, if you go to a remote area, let's say you go to a forest or you go to a hilly place where there's no big cities and all that, then you will see that at night you can see all the stars, and the stars are super visible. You can even see the Milky Way. One of my earliest memories of my life is seeing the Milky Way, and I was like, what on earth is that? This whole band of stars that look like a cloud, but it's actually stars, and it's part of the galaxy that we live in. So 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago in India, most cities were still very dark, and you could see all the stars. And I remember as a small kid, I used to sometimes spend hours on the terrace of our house, and I used to look at the sky, and I used to wonder what's going on out there. And you know, I could I knew all the stars essentially. I knew all of them individually. I did not know the names of all the stars, but I knew them by the way they looked and the colors and the patterns, the constellations and so on and so forth. And I used to sit and wonder what's going on up there. What's going on? Who all is out there, and so that sort of thing. So the reason we don't see stars to nowadays is because of a combination of atmospheric pollution and light pollution. And 100 years back, the sky looked beautiful, beautiful. You could see stars. Recently, I remember a few years ago, there was a big power blackout in New York, and the people started calling the police because there was strange stuff in the sky. That strange stuff was a Milky Way. uh, Chirag Avasti says, why is it that China always loses when a nation or an empire does a brute force attack on them? Why have they always lost despite having a large population and resources? Uh, Look, every nation has its own character, has its own personality, has its own way of doing things, and maybe there's something about China that causes this issue. So, I did a podcast about 3 years ago with Dr. Edward Luttwak, one of my, when I was like 20 years younger, I was like, who is this guy, Edward Luttwak? He writes wonderful books about geostrategy and history. And then one day I got to do a podcast with him in which I spent an hour with him. So I did this podcast with him, and he said that he cracked a joke. He's a very funny guy. He cracked a joke. He says that, how do you conquer China? What do you need? What does it take to conquer China? And the answer is three guys on horseback. That's it. So the moment you take the war to China's homeland, the Chinese lose. Every time somebody has invaded them and forced them to fight on their own territory, the Chinese have lost. Historically, you've seen this pattern. But when the Chinese fight outside of their homeland, beyond their own territory, they often win. Not always, but they often win. So that's a key to understanding China. We cannot forget that. You want to beat them, you have to beat them on their territory. Okay. Bank says, how does China feel about Pakistan being cozy with the US, and how does the US feel about China being cozy, Pakistan being cozy with China? Both are fine with it. They understand. Look, these nations are not emotional like us. We are like, oh, you backstabbed me. You were working with me, and now you're in bed with the other guy. That sort of thing. These nations understand how things work. Um, Pakistan wants as many masters as possible to have as many benefits as possible. And the US and China see eye to eye on the question of India. They both want Pakistan as a big counterbalance to India. So China and the US are okay. Of course, the US doesn't want Pakistan to become too closely attached to China. That's why they have taken steps and measures. And the Pakistanis themselves are more comfortable with the US than with China. So that is the dynamic between these nations. Okay, Galuer says striking Dimona with standoff beyond visual range. Weapons require serious ISR. Chinese ISR? Any evidence or indications, any OSINT material related to that effect? The Iranians have tremendously good um, missiles, ballistic and cruise missiles. They also have drones which they're able to launch at Israel. They have done that in the past. A few months ago, there were these attacks, right? These tit for tat attacks. Um, so the Iranians have very high quality missiles, ballistic missiles. They have hypersonic missiles, maybe cruise missiles or whatever it is, and they have high quality drones. So you launch all of this in coordination, it can overwhelm the local air defenses, the Dome or whatever it is. So yeah, that's what the Iranians are capable of. Um, okay, let's take a couple more questions. After that, we are done. We'll be done after that until tomorrow. Rishabh says, regarding reading bombing atomic weapons on Japan, was it necessary even to some extent? If yes, then why twice? They were very cruel. They exploited our people on Andaman Island. The Japanese military during the Second World War was very cruel. Okay, I agree. No question. Okay, why were they cruel? Because they had given up. They had given up dharma. And as long as the Meiji Empire, as the samurai existed, the Japanese nation was founded on the principles of dharma, the dharmic principles. But the Meiji Restoration attempted to uproot dharma out of Japan. As a consequence, it was able to adharmify their military, and that's why it did such horrible things to the people they conquered. Yeah, very, very, very cruel stuff. Now, was it necessary to bomb Japan with atomic weapons? I think it was a test to see the effect of atomic weapons on human beings. And of course, the justification was that otherwise an invasion of Japan would have cost hundreds of thousands of American lives, and by bombing them, we were able to make them to make them surrender and so on. And because we bombed them once and they did not surrender, we had to bomb them twice. So that's the thing, and that's how it goes. Overall, these were atomic tests on human beings, and they caused a tremendous amount of suffering among civilians. Okay. Abhijit Chavda Light says, "How can UFOs fly without propulsion systems? Do we have UFOs? Do we have evidence that UFO exists? That UFOs exist? Well, I've never seen a UFO. Have I? Maybe not. Maybe. So, look. First of all, we don't know these UFOs exist. And secondly, how do we know that if they exist, they fly without propulsion technology or systems? Maybe they have some systems. Maybe the UFOs are Lockheed Martin technology, or maybe they are ISRO technology, or something technology, where advanced technology that nobody knows about. If they are flying, it means they have some kind of system that is propelling them. Mayank says, is Indian missile problem on par with US, China, Russia? Considering we will have functional hypersonic missiles soon, and US doesn't have it, it's possible that our missile system is probably more advanced than most nations in the world. At least in terms of missiles, we are behind nobody. We are at least on par with the top nations in the world, on par for sure, if not ahead of them. So yeah, we will soon have functioning hypersonic missiles. There's an upcoming hypersonic test which will happen anytime soon of a missile with a 1,500 kilometer range with a hypersonic motor. So that'll be fun. So I think when it comes to missiles, we are behind nobody at all in the world. And with that, I think we come to the end of today's session. So thank you very much for the questions. Um, and I'll see you tomorrow in tomorrow's live stream. I'll decide tomorrow whether to turn super chat back on again or not. Perhaps super chat is is probably simpler for me, but let's see about that. So tomorrow we have an episode of the Indian Interest at 8 p.m. India time. After that, once that ends, I'll immediately go into another episode of the Ask Abhijit show. So I hope to see you then tomorrow 8 p.m. Until then, take care, keep asking questions, keep raising your standards, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye bye.